Hey everybody, it's Chris here, back with another video. Today I'm going to be talking about my Beatles collection. I'll go through my Beatles LPs, and then I'll also at the end go through my solo Beatles stuff, post-Beatles stuff, and just talk about them. So before I get started, I just want to say to everyone, thank you to anyone who subscribed or left a comment or gave me a like on my first few videos. I kind of said that I was nervous about doing them, and I received a lot of positive feedback, a lot of people welcoming me into the VC, and I feel very welcome. So thank you everyone who did that. Now let's get right into it, okay? As I mentioned in my intro, my mother was a big Beatles fan. Her and her sister, my aunt, were big Beatles fans, so I have a lot of Beatles records from the 60s. And it's really confusing keeping track of all the Beatles releases because there were different ones in the UK than there were in Canada, than there were in the States. The reason for that is that I guess Capitol Records tried to really monetize and capitalize on Beatlemania that was going on, and between the Beatles actually releasing their official albums, Capitol would release almost like a compilation. It was an album that would have some of their singles on it, or like a piece of songs from a previous album that they made, and they would release that with a different title. And they kept doing that up until the mid-60s, around 1966. I think it was right around when Revolver came out, was when Capitol, like UK Capitol, decided to put a stop to that in the States and in Canada, and after that every album is uniform across the world. So there's actually 13 official, they call it the core Beatles albums. I have way more than 13. Obviously a lot of them are not part of the core albums, but of the core albums I have 10 of the 13. I'm missing Beatles for Sale, Please Please Me First, Beatles for Sale, and Yellow Submarine. Those are the three that I'm missing of the core. But let's get into them right now, and I'll show you guys some records. So, first album, this is Beatlemania with the Beatles. This was the first Beatles album that was released in Canada. I think in the States there was a different album that was released first. And this looks a lot like With the Beatles, which I think was the second UK album that the Beatles released. But this was released in November 1963. Beatles made their appearance on Ed Sullivan in February 1964. So this is a really nice early copy, one of my oldest records that I have, and it's certainly good to have this one in the collection, which you'll probably hear me say that a lot, but it's true. Next up, we have Twist and Shout. This is not one of the core albums. This one, what do I say about this one? This one is kind of comprised of there's a lot of tracks off of Please Please Me that are on this one as well. Next up, Long Tall Sally. This is also not a core Beatles album, and this looks a lot like, in the States, there was one that looks just like this. Instead of Long Tall Sally, it says the Beatles' second album, which it actually wasn't the real Beatles' second album, because With the Beatles was the Beatles' real UK second album. So this is what I'm talking about, where it's really confusing to keep track of. But obviously, now, my Beatles albums, I said before, most of them are originals. They're all pretty old, obviously, and they're a bit kind of stained with time, whatever you want to call it. But they're all in pretty good shape. Not excellent shape, but pretty good shape. And mostly all of them are on, you'll see the Capitol swirl, the rainbow Capitol swirl label. Next up, Beatles Hard Day's Night. This is the Canadian release. This is on the Blue United Artists label. There is an entirely different album cover, I think that was released in the UK for Hard Day's Night, which is blue, and it's got just like it's like this, except there's like 25 pictures here of them all. But it's a good soundtrack to have. Next up is something new from the Beatles. I feel like there was something I wanted to say. No, never mind. Something new from the Beatles. This is also not a core catalog album, but it's a good one nonetheless. This has got the German Komm, gib mir deine Hand, the I Want to Hold Your Hand, but the German version. So that's pretty cool. Next up is the Beatles Story. This is a double LP. This is like spoken word album. Every side is dedicated to a different member of the Beatles. There's like an interview with each of them, and no music at all on these ones, but is a double album, also on the Rainbow Swirl. Beatles 65 is next up. Also not an official core catalog album, but this is the one. This one's got I Feel Fine, which is one of my favorite Beatles, certainly one of my favorite early Beatles albums. I love that reverb right off the front, and then right off the top, and then you just hear George, I'm assuming it's George, with that nice little guitar picking to start off. So this is great. Next up is Beatles 6. Not even their official sixth album, but in Canada, this was their 6th release. Still, obviously, you've got the old, early Beatles, the kind of doo-wop, old time rock and roll type music on here. So, yeah, you obviously everyone knows they get into the experimental stuff later. So this is Help by the Beatles. This is also different cover than what you'll see in the UK. The UK, well, is this, but it's colorized with them in the blue jackets. But this is the Canadian version. Rainbow Swirl. Okay, next up, Rubber Soul. This is where you kind of hear their sound starting to change. They're starting to get a lot more mature as songwriters. They're doing less covers, and they're doing more of their own material. And obviously, this is now kind of where, yeah, you'll hear their sound is changing, and they start, not quite on this album, they start to get a little bit psychedelic, but not really on that one. Next is Yesterday and Today. This is what people would call the Butcher. Well, it's not the Butcher cover, but this is the trunk cover. From my understanding, what I've read, the Butcher cover didn't really make it to shelves in Canada. They had already pulled it off the shelves at that point. As I said in one of my intro videos, that I've looked for. You can tell if your trunk cover is a Butcher cover because they pasted over top of it. They just, instead of making new sleeves, they just slapped this cover over top of the original. So Ringo's face is here in the original one, and he's got his little butcher's coat on, and he's got a black shirt underneath, and he's got a V-neck, and you can see the black that shows under here. So right around here, if you look for the black little V-neck underneath, you've got a third state, what they would call, I think they call it that, a third state Beatles. Third state Butcher cover. First state is the actual Butcher's cover. Second state is one that's ripped off. If you take it off, that's the second state, and then third state is one without. Or else I'm mixing in the second state and the third state, but I'm not sure. So maybe someone has some information on that. Okay, next up, Beatles Revolver. from I think 1966. And as I said a little while ago, this is where you start to hear the Beatles getting experimental. They're starting to take some drugs, some psychedelic stuff, and it starts to show in this album particularly. Okay, next up, this is like the only Beatles album I have that is not an original. This is a reissue. This is from, I think, 2016. This was a gift. I actually did have an original stereo Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. I gave it to someone. I don't want to get into it because I'll just get upset. But I had one. I don't have it anymore because, I mean, I have this. This is on Parlophone. But a nice reissue. This is really clean. This is near mint, so it's great to have a copy of Sgt. Pepper's that's near mint. And the production on this album, even just the track listing, is great. Every song leads you in. It starts to get towards the middle and the end. It starts to get really psychedelic, and it's a great. Obviously, I don't need to tell you guys that Sgt. Pepper's is a great album. I'm not the first one to ever say that. So, okay, next up, Magical Mystery Tour. This is a mono copy. This is actually right around this time. This is 1967. Right around this time, the Beatles or Capitol stopped issuing Beatles records in mono. And because stereo was getting really popular. So this is kind of a bit of a rare one. It's a rare mono. So check yours out. If you have a mono, it might be a little bit expensive. And also a good way to tell if you have an early Beatles pressing, at least if you're in Canada, is that at the bottom, it's really hard to see, but at the bottom of the label here, it says manufactured in Canada by Capitol Records, and then in parentheses it says Canada and then Limited or LTD. Before this album, so any of the other ones I've shown, I think it's actually before Yesterday and Today. Yesterday and Today was the last album to be released without the parentheses, the Canada in parentheses. So if you check any of your early Beatles album and it has parentheses, then it's not an original. But if it doesn't have parentheses, in Canada's not in parentheses, then it's most likely an original. So there's a little tidbit for you. Obviously some great tracks on this. Strawberry Fields Forever, one of my favorite Beatles albums, super psychedelic. Baby You're a Rich Man is great. And Magical Mystery Tour, I'm the Walrus. Again, I don't need to tell you guys, these are good albums. Okay, next up I have a couple versions of the White Album. This one is numbered. Got a little bit of wear, a little bit of ring wear on here. And obviously because Sgt. Pepper's was so much going on the cover here, they wanted to really be just simple. That's why you get the White Album here. And then this is also where you'll start to see the albums, instead of being on the Rainbow Capitol, they're on the Apple, because they had started their own label by that point. Next up, Abbey Road. Mine's got some a rip here, which is unfortunate. This for me is my favorite Beatles album. I think it's amazing. Unfortunately, it's I mean, side 2 is, we all know, the kind of the medley, the Golden Slumbers and all that, the Polythene Pam, the medley, because the Beatles were so dysfunctional as a band, they couldn't even collaborate, and they were just coming to George Martin with little snippets of songs. And so Martin decided that he can paste them all together into like a big long medley. Apparently, John wasn't happy with the medley. He didn't like it. I think it was great. And I also heard something that this album is actually it should have been, so what ended up on side 2 was supposed to be on side 1, and side 2 was supposed to start with Come Together. That's what I heard. So interesting tidbit as well. Next up, a couple albums of, this is, some people call it Let It Be, or not Let It Be, sorry. Some people call it Hey Jude. Some people call it The Beatles Again. So you'll see that one of these says The Beatles Again on the cover, and then one of these are on the label, and then one of these says Hey Jude on the label. So I think the actual name for it was supposed to be The Beatles Again. This is also another example of, it's not a core catalog. It's the label was sick of waiting for the Beatles to come out with something, so this is a compilation, essentially a compilation of all a bunch of the Beatles singles. And I also heard that this was supposed to be the front cover of this album, but whoever made it thought this cover was better, and they put this one out. I think this is George's property. George or John's property. I think it was George's property. A photo shoot that they had, and it's the last photo shoot they had ever as a band. And I'm sure a lot of people already know that, you know, now if you've got Disney Plus, you're watching the Get Back. So a lot of people know tons of things about the Beatles now because of that. Let It Be. Let It Be was the last album the Beatles released, but it was actually recorded before Abbey Road, but they had a bunch of production problems with it, so it ended up being the last one to be released. Okay, so now that's it for my Beatles releases. Now I've got not too many, but a few Beatles or post-Beatles albums to talk about. This one's the classic. Everyone knows. This one just had, well, I guess it was a while ago, but their 50th year anniversary. This is from 1970, November 1970. This is I don't know, people call it a double album. It's got 3 discs. It's officially a double album with like this extra Apple Jam, which is George and all the people on this album just like jamming out for some really long tracks. Obviously, there's some really great tracks on here. Wah Wah, I Dig Love, a lot of stuff that apparently George tried to get on Beatles albums, and whomever, whether it was Paul or John or the producer, didn't like them and didn't put them on there. So he came out guns a-blazing with a triple album, and apparently John was pretty jealous that it was such a big hit. And then John responded in December of 1970 with the Plastic Ono Band. I talked a little bit about this already, this album. This is on Capitol, but not the Ring. This is on Capitol, and this is a reissue, 1980 reissue. I mentioned about how him and Yoko were going through scream therapy, and you hear him scream singing on it, and he sings about the loss of his parents on this one. So it's pretty raw. It's not very like highly produced. There's not a ton of instruments on here, so it's kind of a broken down album. But it's very good. A lot of people say this is John's best solo album. He followed this up with Imagine. Some people say Imagine is his best solo album. I actually don't have Imagine, so you won't be seeing that on this list. But next up for me this is an album from 1978. Paul McCartney and the Wings. This is London Town. The Wings had lost a couple of members. They were only a trio at this point. Most of the songs are written by McCartney. Some of the songs have Denny Lane, the guitarist, writing as well. This album's okay. I'm probably, this is a controversial take, but Paul's not my favorite Beatle. I think he wrote some amazing Beatles tunes, but him and John worked best together. Again, this is not a hot take. I'm sure many people realize this, but I don't love a lot of Paul's solo stuff. But this album is pretty cheap. If you're a fan of Paul, pick it up. It's like $5, Next up, this is 1979. This is George Harrison. This is self-titled. This is pretty good. This album's pretty good. It's softer album. One of the songs on here is called Not Guilty. I think it was one of the singles off this. It was actually written during the White Album sessions, and I guess John or Paul didn't like the song and they didn't let it go on the White Album, but George saved it and then, like, what, 12 years later released it here. Decent George album. If you're a fan of George, you'll probably like this. Next up is John Lennon, Yoko Ono. This is Double Fantasy. This is the last album that John released when he was alive. This was released 3 weeks before he was murdered. It wasn't a huge commercial success when it was released, and then, of course, he got shot, and then it's skyrocketed in the sales in the album charts, and then it got a Grammy for Album of the Year. So I mean, obviously there's some Yoko on here. Basically they every track, one track's John, then Yoko for the most part. But there's some good John tracks on here. Just like Starting Over, Watching the Wheels, Woman, and Beautiful Boy, Darling Boy is on here, which is a really sweet, nice album. John had taken 5 years off to raise his son Sean that he had with Yoko, and so this is his first album back from his 5-year hiatus. Next up is Paul McCartney, Pipes of Peace. This is from, I believe, 1983. This is a pop album, standard pop. A couple songs on here feature Michael Jackson. Say 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 is on here, which was one of the singles. And yeah, I mean, this is straight pop. If you like Paul, if you like pop music, maybe this is for you. But this is one of my least favorite of all the albums that we're showing here. But that's just me. If you like it, that's great. Okay, the last one is, this is from 1989. A lot of people probably know this one. This is the Traveling Wilburys. This is like a super group, essentially. We've got Bob Dylan of Bob Dylan, Jeff Lynne from ELO, Tom Petty, Roy Orbison, and George Harrison. This was like a George Harrison project. He assembled the band on this. This is their debut. This has got the big hit End of the Line, and shoot, what's the other one? Handle with Care. And then there's also a good one that was penned by Bob Dylan on here, which is Tweeter and the Monkey Man. So some good tracks. Pretty much every track is kind of written by a different member. They had this gimmick where they were all brothers, and they have this backstory. Their last name is Wilbury, and there's like Dusty Wilbury and all this. And if you watch the music video for this, for I think it's End of the Line, Roy Orbison, he passed away shortly after this album was released, and he wasn't there to film the music video. So in the music video for End of the Line, anytime Roy Orbison is singing, they just show his rocking chair with his guitar on it, just rocking, as like a little bit of a tribute to him. The Traveling Wilburys only released 2 albums. Their second album was called Traveling Wilburys Volume 3, even though it was their second one. I think that was 1991 that was released. If you can find it on vinyl, it's worth picking up, because at that point in the 90s, they weren't really pressing a lot of albums, and so it's valuable if you can find it. So something to keep an eye out for. Now, that's it for my collection of Beatles and post-Beatles stuff. I hope you guys liked it. Leave me some comments. What am I missing? I mean, I already told you about the core albums that I'm missing, and so just as a completist, I'd like to get those and add those into my collection. But maybe there's some solo Beatles ones that I'm missing out on. What's your favorite solo Beatles album or post-Beatles album, or your favorite Beatles album? Let me know in the comments. Thank you guys so much. If you like the video, give it a like. Take 1 second, give it a like, consider subscribing, and until next time, thank you guys so much. Take care.